A little girl rescues two puppies from the trash, dragging them home with nothing but a belt and a shoelace. But what she doesn't know is they're not dogs at all. They're 3 times her size, bred to fight wolves and illegal to keep. Still, they follow her like they've always belonged to her. When her neighbors panic, her landlord threatens eviction and her family starts to fall apart. She refuses to give them up. So who are these powerful animals? Why do they only listen to her? And what happens when she's forced to choose between the dogs that saved her and the family that's breaking around her? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Lucy's worn sneakers scuffed against the cracked sidewalk as she made her way home from school. The 2 big shoes, handed down from a cousin, made soft flopping sounds with each step. Her backpack felt extra heavy today, loaded with math worksheets and a thick science book, thumping steadily against her back as she walked. The cold March wind whipped through the streets of Cicero, making her pull her white cardigan tighter around her small frame. Her faded pink dress fluttered around her knees. Above her, gray clouds rolled across the sky like waves of smoke, threatening rain, but never quite delivering. She passed by Maria's corner store, where the neon open sign flickered weakly in the window. The smell of greasy French fries from Tony's Burgers next door mixed with car exhaust from the busy street. Lucy breathed it all in, these familiar scents of her neighborhood that she walked through every day, all by herself. Chain-link fences lined most of the yards, some rusted, others leaning slightly. Some had "Beware of Dog" signs hanging crooked, though Lucy rarely saw any actual dogs behind them. Potholes dotted the street like moon craters, forcing cars to swerve around them with annoyed honks. As she approached the old strip mall, Lucy noticed fresh graffiti sprayed across one wall, bright blues and reds that almost made the tired building look cheerful. Most of the stores were empty now, their windows covered with brown paper or "For Lease" signs. Only the laundromat at the end still had customers, the machines humming their endless cycle of wash and dry. That's when she heard it, a low, rumbling growl coming from the alley behind the building. The sound made her pause mid-step. Most kids would have hurried past, pretending they hadn't heard anything. But Lucy wasn't most kids. She stood still for a moment, her head tilted to one side, listening. The growl came again, softer this time, followed by what sounded like whimpering. It was coming from behind the rusty dumpster that sat in the shadows of the alley. Lucy's heart beat faster, but not from fear. Something about that sound pulled at her, like a whisper calling her name. She glanced around. No one was watching. Carefully, she stepped into the alley, her oversized sneakers crunching on scattered gravel. The smell was worse here, rotting garbage and something metallic, like old pipes. Lucy wrinkled her nose but kept moving forward. As she got closer to the dumpster, she could hear more clearly, definitely whimpering, and the sound of something shifting against cardboard. Taking a deep breath, Lucy peered around the edge of the dumpster. At first, all she saw was a broken wooden crate, its slats splintered and worn. Then something moved inside it, and her eyes widened. 2 enormous creatures huddled together in the crate, their massive bodies barely fitting in the space. Their fur was caked with mud and who knew what else, matted into clumps that hung from their bodies. Lucy could count their ribs through their dirty coats. But it was their eyes that caught and held her attention, deep brown and intelligent, watching her with a mixture of wariness and something that looked almost like hope. They were dogs, she thought, but bigger than any dogs she'd ever seen before. They looked like oversized puppies, with huge paws and soft, uncertain expressions. One of them made that whimpering sound again, and Lucy's heart melted completely. Without hesitation, she shrugged off her heavy backpack and set it down carefully. Inside was her afternoon snack, a juice box and the sandwich she'd saved from lunch. Her mom always cut off the crust knowing Lucy wouldn't eat them. Now she was glad she had them. "It's okay," she whispered, keeping her voice soft and gentle. "I won't hurt you." She pulled out the juice box first, puncturing it with the straw. Holding it low to the ground, she squeezed it gently, making a small puddle on the concrete. The dogs watched, their ears perking up slightly. The larger one, though they were both enormous, inched forward just a bit, its nose twitching at the sweet smell of the apple juice. Lucy smiled encouragingly and reached into her bag again, pulling out the sandwich crusts. "Are you hungry?" she asked in that same soft voice. "These aren't much, but they're better than nothing, right?" She tossed a piece of crust gently toward them, making sure it landed well within their reach. The smaller dog stretched its neck out, sniffing the offering. After a moment's hesitation, it quickly snatched up the bread and swallowed it in one gulp. "Poor babies," Lucy cooed, her voice full of sympathy. "You must be so hungry." She tossed another piece, and this time both dogs moved forward to get it. As they shifted, she could see just how big they really were. Even sitting down, they were almost as tall as she was. The larger dog finished its share of bread and looked at her with those soulful eyes. Slowly, carefully, it moved closer until its nose nearly touched her hand. Lucy held perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Then she felt it, a gentle nudge against her fingers, like the softest request for more pets. "Hi, babies," she whispered, crouching down beside the crate. Her heart felt so full it might burst. The smaller dog inched forward too, drawn by her gentle voice and kind presence. Lucy smiled, a warm certainty settling over her. She already knew what she had to do. These weren't just any stray dogs. They were her dogs now, and she was going to take them home. Lucy knelt beside the crate, her small hands trembling with excitement as she unbuckled her worn leather belt. The metal buckle clinked softly as she worked it free from her dress. The bigger of the two dogs watched her with careful eyes, but didn't move away when she reached out. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, threading the belt through itself to make a loop. "This is just so we can walk together." Her voice stayed gentle and steady, like when she helped the kindergartners tie their shoes at recess. The dog's fur felt rough and matted under her fingers as she slipped the makeshift collar around its thick neck. It was still damp from whatever puddle or stream the dog had been in, and it smelled like wet leaves and mud. For the second dog, Lucy dug through her backpack, pushing aside crumpled homework papers and half-eaten snacks until she found an old shoelace. It was frayed at the ends, but still strong enough. This dog seemed more nervous, backing up slightly as she approached. "Don't be scared," Lucy cooed. "I'm going to take care of you both." She hummed a little tune from her favorite cartoon as she worked, the same way her brother Mateo used to hum to her when she had bad dreams. The dog gradually relaxed, allowing her to loop the shoelace around its neck. Lucy stood up slowly, holding both makeshift leashes. The dogs rose with her, their massive bodies towering over her small frame. But she wasn't afraid. Instead of pulling or yanking, she gave the leashes a gentle tug. "Come on, babies," she said softly. "Let's go home." The dogs followed her lead, their huge paws padding quietly against the dirty concrete. Lucy guided them away from the dumpster and deeper into the alley, choosing the narrower passages between buildings instead of the main streets. The smell of garbage and cooking oil from nearby restaurants filled the air, but Lucy barely noticed it anymore. She kept up a steady stream of quiet chatter as they walked. "You're going to love my cartoons," she told them, stepping carefully around a broken bottle. "There's this one about a magic princess who can talk to animals, Maybe she could tell me what kind of dogs you are." The bigger dog's tail wagged slightly, and Lucy beamed. "See? You understand me?" At the end of the alley, Lucy peeked around the corner before leading them down a side street. An old woman sat at the bus stop, her shopping bags gathered around her feet like tired children. When she saw Lucy and the dogs, her mouth dropped open, and she clutched her purse tighter. Lucy quickened her pace, but kept her movements smooth and calm. The dogs stayed close, their breaths warm against her back. They passed a teenage boy lounging behind the liquor store, cigarette dangling from his fingers. He did a double take, the cigarette nearly falling from his mouth. "Just keep walking," Lucy whispered to her new friends. "We're almost there." The familiar shape of her apartment building came into view. 3 stories of faded brick and peeling paint, with rusty fire escapes zigzagging up the walls like metal vines. Lucy led the dogs around to the back, where the emergency stairwell door was always slightly broken, never quite closing properly. She paused, watching a neighbor carry groceries through the front entrance. The woman disappeared inside, and Lucy counted to 20 before moving. The dogs followed her perfectly, their nails clicking softly against the concrete. Just as they reached the door, the bigger dog's tail knocked against a metal trash bin. The hollow clang echoed through the alley, and Lucy's heart jumped into her throat. The dog whined softly, ducking its head. "Shh, it's okay," Lucy soothed, reaching up to pat its side. "You didn't mean to." The dog pressed against her hand, and Lucy felt its racing heartbeats slow down. The stairwell was dark and smelled like old cigarettes, but Lucy knew every step by heart. She guided the dogs up slowly, pausing at each landing to listen for footsteps or voices. The shoelace felt slippery in her sweaty palm, but she held on tight. Finally, they reached her floor. Lucy pressed her ear against the heavy metal door, listening. The hallway beyond was quiet. No TV sounds, no talking, no footsteps on the thin carpet. She eased the door open and peeked out. Empty. "Come on," she whispered, tugging gently on the leashes. The dogs followed her down the hall, their huge bodies taking up most of the narrow space. The ugly brown carpet muffled their steps, but Lucy's heart still pounded with each movement. At her apartment door, Lucy fished her key from her dress pocket. The metal was warm from being pressed against her leg all day. She slid it into the lock as quietly as she could, turning it slowly to minimize the click. The door creaked open, revealing the familiar sight of their small living room. The afternoon light filtered through thin curtains, casting long shadows across the worn furniture. Lucy looked up and down the hall one last time, then motioned for the dogs to enter. They hesitated for just a moment, sniffing at the threshold. Then, with surprising grace for their size, they padded into the apartment. Their fur brushed against the doorframe as they passed through. Lucy slipped inside after them and closed the door with a soft click. She leaned against it, her heart thundering in her chest, and watched as the dogs took in their new home. Lucy guided the dogs into the small bathroom, her heart racing with excitement. The cramped space barely fit the 2 massive animals, but she managed to squeeze in behind them. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the peeling wallpaper. "Okay, babies," she whispered, reaching under the sink. "We need to get you clean." Her small hands found the rough stack of mechanic rags her dad had left behind years ago. They still smelled faintly of motor oil and memories. The older bathtub groaned as Lucy turned the faucet. Warm water splashed against the stained porcelain, and steam began to rise. The dogs' ears perked up at the sound, and they moved closer to investigate, their huge paws clicking against the linoleum floor. "See? It's just water," Lucy said softly, dipping her hand in to test the temperature. The bigger dog stretched its neck forward, sniffing the rising water with curiosity. Its companion pressed close behind, nearly knocking Lucy over. Once the tub was half full, Lucy took a deep breath. "Okay, big guy, you first." She patted the side of the tub encouragingly. The dog looked at her, then at the water, then back at her. Its tail gave a tentative wag. "Come on," she coaxed, gently tugging on her makeshift belt leash. "You can do it." The dog lifted one massive paw and placed it carefully on the tub's edge. Then, with surprising grace for its size, it heaved itself over and splashed into the water. Lucy giggled as drops sprayed her face. The second dog, not wanting to be left out, suddenly lunged forward. Water sloshed over the sides as both animals shifted in the crowded tub, their matted fur dark and heavy. "Hold still," Lucy laughed, grabbing the yellow bottle of dish soap from the edge of the tub. She squeezed a generous amount onto one of the rags and began scrubbing the first dog's back. Chunks of dried mud dissolved into the water, turning it a murky brown. The bigger dog, enjoying the attention, twisted around to lick Lucy's face. Its tongue was warm and rough, and she squealed with delight. "That tickles." But the movement made the other dog restless. It stood up suddenly, paws scrambling against the slick tub bottom. The shower curtain rattled as the dog's shoulder bumped against it, and before Lucy could react, the whole rod came crashing down. No, wait!" Lucy called out, but she couldn't help laughing as the plastic curtain wrapped around the dog like a ghost costume. The animal shook itself vigorously, sending a spray of soapy water in all directions. Meanwhile, the first dog had become fascinated by the running faucet. It batted at the stream with one huge paw, like a cat playing with string. The metal fixture creaked under the force, and suddenly water burst out sideways, hitting Lucy square in the chest. She gasped at the spray but kept grinning. Her cardigan was soaked through, her dress plastered to her skin, but she didn't care. The dogs were having fun, and so was she. As Lucy worked, the true colors of their coats began to emerge from beneath the grime. The bigger dog's fur lightened to reveal a beautiful white coat with tan patches across its back and face. The other one turned out to be a striking dark gray, like storm clouds before rain. Despite all the chaos, neither dog showed any sign of aggression. They played and splashed, but their movements remained gentle around Lucy, as if they knew she was small and needed to be protected. Lucy had just wrapped her arms around the white dog's neck, laughing as it sneezed soap bubbles into her face, when the bathroom door suddenly burst open. The lock, old and loose, hadn't held. There in the doorway stood her brother Matteo, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. His dark eyes went wide as he took in the scene. The flooded floor, the fallen shower curtain, his little sister drenched from head to toe, and two enormous dogs barely contained in their family's small bathtub. "What the—" Matteo's mouth hung open in shock. "Lucy, what did you bring home?" Matteo slammed the bathroom door shut, his eyes wide with panic. Water dripped steadily from the crooked faucet, creating small puddles on the floor. The two massive dogs sat quietly in the cramped space, their wet fur making them look even more intimidating. "Lucy, what were you thinking?" Matteo whispered urgently, running his hands through his dark hair. "These aren't normal dogs." "They were in a box," Lucy protested, her voice rising. She wrapped her arms protectively around the nearest dog's neck. "In the trash, Matteo." Behind the dumpster at the strip mall. "Shh." Matteo pressed a finger to his lips, glancing nervously at the bathroom door. "Mom will hear you. Did they bite you? Show me your hands." Lucy held out her small hands, still damp from bathing the dogs. "Look, no bites. They're gentle, I promise. They let me wash them and everything." Matteo pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened the camera. The bathroom light flickered as he took several photos of the dogs, who watched him with intelligent amber eyes. Their massive heads reached past Lucy's shoulders even while sitting. "Stay still," he muttered, focusing on their distinctive features: the broad skulls, the thick ruffs of fur around their necks, the enormous paws that looked bigger than Lucy's hands. The white one yawned, revealing rows of impressive teeth, and Mateo took a step back. Lucy stroked the gray dog's head. "See? They're just tired and hungry. They need us." Mateo opened Google and uploaded the photos, adding keywords like giant dog breed and huge guard dog. His face grew increasingly pale as he scrolled through the results. "Oh no," he breathed. "Oh no, no, no." "What?" Lucy asked, looking worried for the first time. "What's wrong?" "They're Caucasian ovcharkas," Mateo said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned his phone screen toward Lucy, showing her pictures that perfectly matched their new companions. "They're not pets, Lucy. They're livestock guardian dogs. They're bred to fight wolves." Lucy looked between the phone and the dogs, who had stretched out on the wet bathroom floor, seemingly at peace. "But they're so nice," she insisted. Mateo scrolled frantically through various websites. "Listen to this. Caucasian ovcharkas are known for their extreme aggressive tendencies toward strangers and other animals. They require extensive training and socialization from an early age. Many states have restrictions or outright bans on owning this breed due to their protective instincts and potential for aggression." The white dog rolled onto its side, exposing its belly. Lucy reached out to scratch it, and the dog's tail thumped against the floor. "Lucy, stop!" Mateo hissed. "These dogs can grow to over 200 pounds. They're literally bred to attack anything they see, as a threat." "But they don't see us as threats," Lucy argued. She stood up and walked to the door. The dogs' heads lifted, watching her attentively. "Come here, babies," she called softly. Both dogs immediately got up and padded over to her, their movements careful in the small space. They sat when she pointed to the floor, their eyes never leaving her face. Mateo pressed himself against the wall, clutching his phone like a shield. "This is insane," he muttered. "They're not supposed to be this calm. Everything I'm reading says they're super aggressive." "Maybe they know we want to help them," Lucy said. She ran her hands over their newly cleaned fur. The white one had beautiful tan patches across its back, while the gray one's coat shimmered like storm clouds. "They were scared and hungry, but they trusted me right away." "They're dangerous," Mateo insisted, though his voice had lost some of its panic as he watched the dogs respond to his sister's every movement. "Look at the size of their teeth." Lucy scratched behind the gray dog's ears, and it leaned into her touch. "They haven't even growled once since I found them. Well, except for that first time, but I think they were just scared." Mateo looked back at his phone, scrolling through more information. "It says here they're one of the most powerful dog breeds in the world. They were originally used to protect sheep from bears and wolves in the mountains of Georgia, like the country, not the state." The white dog flopped onto its back again, and Lucy giggled as she rubbed its belly. The gray one rested its massive head on her shoulder, nearly knocking her over. "We can't keep them," Mateo said, shaking his head. "Even if they seem nice now, they're too dangerous. What if they hurt someone? What if they hurt you?" "They won't," Lucy said with complete conviction. She wrapped her arms around the gray dog's neck. "They need me, and I need them." Mateo stared at the scene before him. His tiny sister, still in her wet clothes, surrounded by two of the most powerful dog breeds in the world. The animals were completely relaxed, their eyes half closed as Lucy petted them. The bathroom floor was a mess of water and soap suds, and the shower curtain hung crooked from where it had been knocked down, but the dogs looked perfectly content. "These things are dangerous," he muttered, gripping his phone tightly. Lucy sat down between the dogs, and they immediately shifted to make room for her. She buried her face in the white dog's fur. "Not to me," she whispered. Mateo paced back and forth in the narrow hallway, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, he could see the two enormous dogs sprawled out on the wet tiles. Their fur was still damp from Lucy's impromptu bath, making dark patches on the floor. Lucy sat cross-legged beside them, her pink dress spotted with water stains, a contented smile on her face. "You can't keep them, Lucy," Mateo said in a hushed voice, trying to keep his tone firm but quiet. "Do you understand how dangerous this is?" Lucy stroked the white dog's head, its eyes closing lazily at her touch. "They're not dangerous," she insisted, her voice carrying the absolute certainty that only an 8-year-old could muster. "Look at them, Mateo. They're just scared and hungry." The gray dog lifted its massive head, ears perking up at their voices. Mateo took an instinctive step back, even though the dog made no move to get up. "Lucy, these aren't regular dogs," Mateo explained, showing her the phone screen again. "They're guard dogs. They're bred to protect sheep from wolves. Wolves, Lucy, and Mom." He ran his hand through his hair nervously. "Mom's going to freak out when she sees them." "Then don't tell her," Lucy said simply, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "Please, Mateo. They need me." Mateo leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He could feel a headache coming on. The responsible part of him knew he should call animal control right now. But Lucy's voice, and the memory of finding her alone so many afternoons while their mom worked late, made him hesitate. "They'll be good, I promise," Lucy continued, her voice growing softer. "They already listened to me. Watch." She turned to the dogs. "Sit," she commanded gently. Both dogs' ears twitched, and they shifted their weight but stayed put. "They don't even know commands," Mateo pointed out, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "They will learn," Lucy said confidently. "I'll teach them. Please, Mateo, don't make me send them away." Mateo looked at his sister's face, her eyes wide and hopeful, her lower lip trembling slightly. He thought about all the times she'd helped him cover for his late-night video gaming, all the times she'd saved him a plate of dinner when he was studying. "Fine," he sighed heavily, already knowing he might regret this. "But you need to keep them hidden. Mom absolutely cannot find out about this. Not yet, anyway." Lucy's face lit up like a Christmas tree. She jumped to her feet and threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "We need a plan," Mateo said, gently disentangling himself from her hug. "Mom will be home soon. The dogs have to stay in the bathroom for now." Lucy nodded seriously. "I can bring them food and water after Mom goes to bed." Mateo went to the kitchen and returned with a stack of leftover tortillas from dinner. The dogs accepted them carefully from Lucy's hands, their massive jaws working slowly as they chewed. While Lucy fed them, Mateo grabbed some towels and started mopping up the water from their impromptu bath time. The bathroom floor was a mess of muddy paw prints and soap suds, but he managed to clean most of it up. "They need names," Lucy whispered as she watched the white dog lick crumbs from her palm. "Let's worry about that later," Mateo said, checking his phone. "Mom should be home any minute." As if on cue, they heard footsteps in the hallway outside their apartment. Lucy quickly closed the bathroom door and practically flew to the living room couch. Mateo grabbed a textbook and pretended to study at the kitchen table. The key turned in the lock, and Maribel Ramirez trudged through the door. Her cleaning uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion as she set down her purse. "Hola, Mommy," Lucy called from the couch, trying to sound casual as she flipped through a picture book. Maribel managed a tired smile. Hola, mi amor. She looked around the apartment briefly, but her exhaustion seemed to prevent her from noticing anything unusual. Did you do your homework? Yes, Mommy, Lucy answered, while Mateo nodded from his spot at the table. Good, Maribel said, stifling a yawn. I'm going to rest for a while. There's leftover rice and beans if you're hungry. They watched as their mother disappeared into her bedroom, closing the door behind her. Lucy and Mateo exchanged glances, both letting out quiet sighs of relief. Mateo got up from the table and sank onto the couch beside Lucy. He stared at the bathroom door, worry etched across his face. Lucy pulled her favorite blanket around her shoulders, a small smile playing on her lips as she heard one of the dogs shift against the bathroom door. We'll figure this out, she whispered to Mateo, patting his hand with complete confidence. You'll see. Mateo just shook his head, but didn't argue. The bathroom door remained closed, hiding their enormous secret, while their mother's soft snores drifted from her bedroom. Lucy snuggled deeper into her blanket, feeling warm and hopeful, knowing her new friends were just a few steps away. Lucy stepped out of her apartment building, her heart light despite the heavy responsibility of walking two enormous dogs. The makeshift leashes, her worn leather belt and a frayed shoelace, looked almost comical against the massive frames of the ovcharkas. But Lucy didn't mind. She held her head high, her faded pink dress swaying in the afternoon breeze. And then in art class, she chatted happily to the dogs, we got to paint with watercolors. I made a rainbow, but Tommy spilled his water cup all over Sarah's desk. The white dog's ears twitched at her voice, while the gray one matched its pace perfectly to her small steps. The sidewalk stretched ahead of them, cracked and worn like everything else in the neighborhood. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked, making the dogs look even more impressive than usual. Lucy's oversized sneakers scuffed against the concrete as she continued her story. Mrs. Peterson said my rainbow was the prettiest in the class, she told them proudly. I wish I could have brought it home to show you, but it has to dry first. The dogs padded along beside her, their huge paws making soft clicking sounds on the pavement. A woman waiting at the bus stop caught sight of them and froze, her magazine dropping slightly as she stared. Lucy smiled and waved, but the woman just pressed her lips together and looked away. Lucy didn't mind. She was used to grown-ups acting strange. You would like Mrs. Peterson, Lucy continued, adjusting her grip on the makeshift leashes. She always has candy in her desk for kids who do good work. Sometimes she gives me an extra piece because she knows I don't get treats at home very often. They passed the corner store where Mr. Rodriguez usually sat in his plastic chair, but today he wasn't there. Instead, a young mother stood outside with her little girl, who pointed excitedly at the dogs. The mother quickly scooped up her daughter and hurried inside the store, the bell jingling sharply as the door closed behind them. The white dog turned its head to watch them go, but Lucy gentle tugged on the belt. It's okay, she said softly. They just don't know you yet. The dog looked back at her, its intelligent eyes seeming to understand. As they continued down the block, Lucy launched into a detailed description of her favorite cartoon show. And then the purple unicorn uses her magic to help all her friends, she explained, gesturing with her free hand. But the best part is when they all sing together at the end. A man walking with his wife and young daughter spotted them from half a block away. His eyes widened, and he quickly ushered his family across the street, throwing nervous glances over his shoulder. Lucy heard him whisper something about dangerous animals to his wife, but she just kept walking, her chin up. You're not dangerous, she assured the dogs, who continued their steady pace beside her. You're just big and special. The gray dog bumped its nose against her arm as if agreeing. They passed more neighbors, some who stared openly, others who pretended not to notice the unusual sight of a tiny girl walking two enormous guard dogs. But Lucy remained in her own happy bubble, sharing stories about her day as if the dogs were old friends who needed catching up. At lunch, I traded my apple for Miguel's cookies, she confided in them. Don't tell Mateo, though. He always says I should eat more fruit. The dog's ears perked up at her conspiratorial tone, making her giggle. A group of teenagers hanging out on someone's front steps fell silent as Lucy and the dogs approached. One boy whispered something to his friends, and they all laughed nervously. But the dogs didn't even glance their way, keeping their focus on Lucy and their walk. The afternoon light was starting to fade as Lucy turned back toward home. She had walked farther than usual, caught up in the joy of having company on her afternoon stroll. The dogs showed no signs of tiredness, maintaining their dignified pace beside her. Tomorrow's Saturday, she told them excitedly. That means no school. We can spend all day together, and I can tell you about all my favorite books. The dogs' tails wagged slightly at her enthusiasm. As they approached their apartment building, Lucy noticed a few curious faces in the windows above. Mrs. Garcia from the second floor was watering her plants, and her mouth dropped open at the sight below. Mr. Peterson from the first floor stopped sweeping his welcome mat to stare. Lucy's heart raced with excitement as they reached the building's entrance. She looked down at her unusual companions, who stood calmly beside her like loyal guardians. Their presence made her feel special, important, like she had a wonderful secret that was all her own. The late afternoon sun caught their fur, making the white dog's coat shine and the gray one's fur look almost silver. They waited patiently as Lucy opened the building's front door, their huge bodies filling the narrow entrance. A few residents in the lobby quickly found reasons to be elsewhere, but Lucy barely noticed. She led the dogs toward the stairs, their nails clicking against the linoleum floor. Her heart was full of pride as they climbed together, the dogs taking each step carefully to stay in perfect rhythm with their small leader. The small kitchen table creaked under the weight of their dinner plates. Steam rose from the bowls of rice and beans, but no one seemed eager to eat. Maribel sat slumped in her chair, her work uniform still on, dark circles under her eyes from another exhausting day of cleaning houses. Her fork moved listlessly across her plate, pushing food around without really eating. Mateo kept shifting in his seat, his eyes darting between his sister and the bathroom door. His shoulders were tense, and he barely touched his food. Every few minutes he'd glance at their mother, checking to see if she noticed anything unusual. Lucy sat quietly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Under the table, she felt the warm, heavy presence of her new friends pressed against her legs. The dogs lay still, their massive bodies somehow fitting perfectly in the cramped space. Every now and then, Lucy would slip a piece of chicken or tortilla beneath the table, feeling their gentle mouths take the food from her fingers. "How was school today?" Maribel asked, her voice tired and distant. She didn't look up from her plate. "Fine," Lucy answered, trying to sound casual. She dropped another piece of chicken under the table, feeling one of the dog's tail thump softly against the floor in appreciation. Mateo coughed suddenly, probably trying to cover up the sound. "Yeah, nothing special," he added quickly. "Just regular stuff." Their mother nodded absently, still focused on her plate. The silence stretched on, broken only by the quiet clink of forks against plates and the distant sound of traffic outside their window. One of the dogs shifted slightly, its fur brushing against Lucy's leg. She reached down to pat its head, amazed at how calm they were being. These weren't the dangerous animals Mateo had warned her about. They were her friends, Gentle giants who understood her completely. Mateo's fork clattered against his plate as he jumped at a small sound from the bathroom. But it was just the building's old pipes groaning, something that happened all the time. Their mother didn't even look up. Lucy continued feeding the dogs piece by piece. She loved how carefully they took the food from her hand, like they knew they had to be extra gentle. Their huge heads rested on her feet, making her feel safe and protected. "I might have to work late tomorrow," Maribel said suddenly, breaking the silence. "There's a special event at the Peterson house. They need extra help." "That's okay, Mama," Lucy said quickly. "I can take care of myself." She felt the dogs press closer to her legs, as if agreeing. Mateo shot her a warning look. "I'll be home," he said. "I can watch Lucy." Their mother nodded again, still not really looking at either of them. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, probably already thinking about tomorrow's work. Lucy knew that look. It meant Mama was too tired to really see what was happening right in front of her. The dogs stayed perfectly still throughout dinner, as if they understood how important it was to remain quiet. Lucy felt proud of them. They were so smart, so good at following her lead. One of them gently licked her ankle, and she had to stop herself from giggling. When dinner was finally over, Maribel stood up slowly, her movements heavy with exhaustion. "I'm going to lie down for a while," she said, gathering her plate. She placed it in the sink and walked to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. Mateo immediately leaned across the table. "Lucy," he whispered urgently, "you can't keep feeding them at the table like that. What if Mama had looked under there?" "But she didn't," Lucy whispered back. "And they're being so good, Mateo. Look how quiet they are." The dogs remained still, their eyes watching the siblings with what seemed like understanding. One of them yawned silently, showing impressive teeth before settling back down. "That's not the point," Mateo said, running his hands through his hair. "This is crazy, Lucy. We can't keep doing this." But Lucy wasn't really listening. She felt warm and content, surrounded by her unusual family. The dogs made her feel complete in a way she couldn't explain to her brother. They needed her, and she needed them. After helping clean up, everyone retreated to their usual evening spots. Maribel stayed in her room, probably already asleep. Mateo went to do homework at the kitchen counter, though he kept glancing nervously around the apartment. Lucy settled onto the worn couch with her favorite book, the dogs naturally following her. They lay down on either side of her, their massive bodies making her feel like she was sitting in a fortress of fur. She opened her book, enjoying the peaceful moment. A neighbor's footsteps passed close to their window, and both dogs lifted their heads slightly, letting out soft growls. Lucy reached out to pat them both. "Shh," she whispered, and they immediately quieted down, putting their heads back on their paws. She turned back to her book, feeling completely at peace. The apartment felt different now, warmer somehow, more like a real home. The dog's steady breathing matched her own, and Lucy felt truly happy for the first time in a long while. The Saturday morning sun filtered through the thin curtains, casting weak shadows across the apartment's worn carpet. Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor, running her fingers through one of the dog's thick fur, while the other dozed nearby. The peaceful moment shattered when the doorbell rang, sharp and demanding. Lucy's head snapped up, meeting Mateo's wide-eyed stare from across the room. Neither of them moved. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. "Who is it?" Maribel called out, emerging from her bedroom in her house-cleaning uniform, hair still damp from her morning shower. "Mr. Kozlov," a gruff voice answered through the door. "Open up, now!" Lucy's heart started racing as she grabbed both dogs by their makeshift leashes, her old belt and shoelace. She tried to guide them toward the bathroom, but they were too slow, too large to hide quickly. Maribel opened the door to reveal Mr. Kozlov's towering frame. The landlord's weathered face was set in hard lines, his thick eyebrows drawn together in a scowl. Behind him stood Mrs. Peterson from apartment 3B, her thin lips pressed together as she peered around his shoulder. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Kozlov demanded, his accent thick with anger as he pointed at the dogs. "Mrs. Peterson tells me there are wild animals in my building, that your daughter walks them around like pets." Lucy clutched the leashes tighter, her small fingers turning white. The dogs sensed her tension, moving closer to her sides. "Mr. Kozlov, I can explain," Mateo started, stepping forward. "Explain. These are no ordinary dogs." Kozlov's voice boomed through the apartment. "I know these breeds. They are guard dogs, fighting dogs. They are meant for military, not for little girls in apartment buildings." Maribel stood frozen, her eyes darting between her children and the landlord. I didn't know about any dogs," she stammered, her accent growing stronger with stress. "They're good dogs," Lucy spoke up, her voice small but steady. "They don't hurt anybody. They're my friends." "Friends?" Kozlov laughed harshly. "These are not friends, little girl. These are dangerous animals. Do you know what they can do? They can kill wolves, and you walk them with a shoelace?" Mrs. Peterson nodded vigorously behind him. "I saw her yesterday, Mr. Kozlov, walking those monsters right past the playground. What if they attacked one of the children?" "They wouldn't," Lucy protested, tears welling in her eyes. "They're gentle. They love me." "Enough!" Kozlov's hand slammed against the door frame, making everyone jump. "I will make this very simple. Those dogs cannot stay here. This is not negotiable. You have until the end of the week to get rid of them." Maribel stepped forward, wringing her hands. "Please, Mr. Kozlov, we can discuss." "No discussion. Either the dogs go or you all go. 1 week." His eyes swept across the room, landing on each face in turn. "I don't want to throw out a hard-working woman and her children, but I will not risk having these animals in my building." Lucy felt tears rolling down her cheeks. One of the dogs whined softly, pressing against her leg. "This is not a game," Kozlov continued, his voice cold. 1 week. After that, you're out. All of you." He turned sharply, nearly knocking Mrs. Peterson over in his haste to leave. The door slammed behind them with such force that the family photos on the wall rattled. The silence that followed was deafening. Maribel sank into a kitchen chair, her face in her hands. Mateo let out a frustrated growl and punched the couch cushion hard. "¿Qué vamos a hacer?" Maribel whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "What are we going to do?" "We can't keep them," Mateo said, his voice cracking. "We can't lose our home, Mama. We have nowhere else to go." "You knew about this?" Maribel looked up at her son, hurt and betrayal in her eyes. "You knew she brought these things into our home?" "I was trying to protect her," Mateo defended. "They're not as dangerous as everyone thinks. Lucy's been taking care of them." "Taking care of them?" Maribel stood up suddenly, her voice rising. "She is 8 years old. These are not puppies. Look at them. They're bigger than she is." Lucy stood quietly between her dogs, holding their leashes like lifelines. The dogs remained calm despite the shouting, their eyes fixed on her face as if they understood everything. "We'll find somewhere else," Lucy said softly. "We can move." "Move," Maribel laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "With what money, mi amor? Do you know how hard it was to find this place? How many places turned us away?" "Then we'll find the dogs a new home," Mateo suggested, though his voice was uncertain. "No!" Lucy's shout surprised everyone, even herself. "They need me. Nobody else wants them. That's why they were in the trash. They'll die without me." Maribel moved toward her daughter, reaching out, but Lucy stepped back, pressing herself against the dog's solid forms. "We're not giving up on you," Lucy whispered to the dogs, her small hands buried in their thick fur. "We're not." The Sunday afternoon sun cast long shadows through the living room window as Mateo hunched over his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before typing "large guard dogs for sale" into the Craigslist posting form. The apartment was quiet, except for the gentle whirring of the old laptop fan and the occasional soft snore from the dogs lounging in the corner. In her small bedroom, Lucy sat on her bed, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. Her tongue stuck out slightly as she concentrated on getting the dogs' expressions just right in her drawing. She'd given them names now, Thunder and Storm, though she hadn't told anyone yet. On the paper, she drew them in a big backyard with toys and bones, the kind of life she wished she could give them. Mateo glanced toward Lucy's closed door, his stomach churning with guilt. The rent was due soon, and his mom's cleaning job barely covered their expenses as it was. They couldn't afford to lose this apartment. His eyes drifted to the dogs, who looked up at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. "It's the only way," he whispered to himself, though the words felt hollow. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the dogs. They posed naturally, their massive frames filling the frame. Even through the photos, their gentle nature showed through, despite their intimidating size. Mateo's hands shook slightly as he uploaded the photos to Craigslist. He wrote a description, trying to sound professional. 2 purebred Caucasian Shepherd dogs, Ovcharka. Well-behaved, good with children, priced negotiable. He paused before adding, "Must go to good home," as if that would somehow make what he was doing feel less wrong. The cursor blinked over the post button. Mateo closed his eyes, remembering how Lucy had been talking to the dogs just that morning, telling them about her dreams of taking them to the park someday. His finger clicked the mouse before he could change his mind. In her room, Lucy added final touches to her drawing, a big red heart around the dogs and herself. She heard the soft click of Mateo's laptop closing in the living room and decided to show him her artwork. Maybe it would help him understand how special Thunder and Storm were. Lucy pushed open her door, drawing clutched to her chest, but stopped short when she saw Mateo's face. He looked pale, guilty. His laptop was closed, but his phone screen was still lit up with the Craigslist website. "What are you doing?" Lucy asked, her voice small and suspicious. She moved closer, catching glimpses of the photos on his phone. Her eyes widened as she recognized Thunder and Storm in the pictures. "Lucy, wait," Mateo started, but she had already snatched his phone. Her hands trembled as she read the advertisement, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're trying to sell them!" Her voice cracked. The drawing fell from her hands, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. "How could you? You promised to help me." "We don't have a choice," Mateo said, reaching for her. "The landlord—" "No!" Lucy backed away from him, her small face twisted with hurt and betrayal. "You're just like everyone else. You don't understand." Before Mateo could stop her, Lucy ran to the dogs. They perked up at her distress, pressing close to her sides as if to protect her. With shaking hands, she clipped on their makeshift leashes. "Lucy, where are you going?" Mateo stood up, worry creasing his forehead. "Somewhere you won't find them," she said, her voice cold in a way that made her sound much older than 8. She led the dogs to the window that opened onto the fire escape. Mateo watched, frozen, as his little sister carefully guided the massive dogs through the window. The dogs followed her trustingly, their huge paws surprisingly graceful on the metal stairs. Lucy climbed up, 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 the dogs right behind her. Their fur ruffled in the wind as they ascended to the roof. She had prepared for this, had hidden some old blankets and dog food up there yesterday, just in case. At the top, Lucy spread out the blanket in a sheltered corner behind some air conditioning units. The dog settled onto it immediately, looking at her with complete trust. She pulled some kibble from her pocket. She'd been storing it bit by bit from the bag they'd bought and poured it out for them. "You're safe here for now," she whispered, wrapping her arms around Thunder's neck while Storm nuzzled her shoulder. From below, Mateo watched through the window, his heart heavy with the knowledge that this temporary solution couldn't last forever. Lucy sat between her dogs on the roof, her small frame dwarfed by their massive bodies. She buried her face in Thunder's fur, letting her tears fall silently. Storm pressed closer, offering warmth and comfort, while the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rooftop. Mateo stood at the window, watching his sister's silhouette against the sky. The Craigslist ad felt like a weight in his pocket, a betrayal he couldn't take back. The dogs had brought out something in Lucy he'd never seen before, a fierce protectiveness, a determination that went beyond her years. He realized with a sinking feeling that by trying to sell the dogs, he hadn't just betrayed Lucy's trust. He'd broken something precious between them. The kitchen light flickered dimly as Maribel sat at the worn wooden table, her work uniform still on, creased from a long day of cleaning other people's homes. Her fingers traced the scratches on the table's surface, each mark telling a story of their struggles. The apartment felt heavy with unspoken words and mounting pressure. In the living room, Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor, her small frame dwarfed by Thunder and Storm's massive bodies. The dogs lay quietly at her feet, their gentle breathing a steady rhythm that somehow made everything feel less scary. Their presence filled the cramped space with a warmth that Lucy had never known before. Maribel's hands trembled as she reached for her cold cup of coffee. The landlord's threat played over and over in her mind like a broken record. Rent was already tight, and now this? She watched Lucy through the kitchen doorway, saw how peacefully her daughter sat with those enormous dogs, and felt her chest tighten with a mixture of love and frustration. "Lucy," Maribel called out, her voice cracking slightly. "Come here, mi amor." Lucy didn't move at first, her fingers buried deep in Storm's thick fur. After a moment, she slowly stood up and walked to the kitchen, the dogs following close behind. Their nails clicked softly against the linoleum floor. "Mommy, please," Lucy started, but Maribel held up her hand. "No, let me speak." Maribel's voice wavered. She stared at her calloused hands, evidence of years of hard work. I can't do this anymore." Her words came out in a whisper that grew louder with each syllable. "The rent, the bills, the food, everything keeps getting harder." Lucy stood very still, her small shoulders tense. The dogs sat obediently behind her, their presence both comforting and overwhelming in the tiny kitchen. Suddenly, Maribel slammed her hands on the table, making the coffee cup rattle. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of stored emotion burst forth. "I work so hard every single day. I clean, and I scrub, and I try to give you everything, but it's never enough." Her voice cracked with exhaustion and pain. "I know, Mommy," Lucy said softly, but Maribel wasn't finished. "And now these dogs." Maribel gestured wildly at the massive animals. "We can't keep them. There's no room, no money for food. We could lose our home." Her words dissolved into quiet sobs, her shoulders shaking with the weight of it all. From the hallway, Mateo appeared, leaning against the doorframe. His face was a mask of worry as he watched his family falling apart. They're the only ones who listen to me, Lucy suddenly screamed, her small voice filling the kitchen with unexpected force. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. Nobody else does. Not you. Not Mateo. You're all too busy. The words hit Maribel like a physical blow. She recoiled, fresh tears springing to her eyes. Lucy, Mateo started, stepping forward, but Lucy wasn't finished. You're never here, Lucy continued, her voice breaking. And when you are, you're too tired to talk to me. But Thunder and Storm, they listen. They stay with me. They make me feel safe. Maribel slapped the table again, this time in frustration. I'm trying my best, she cried out. I'm doing everything I can. The dog shifted uneasily behind Lucy, picking up on the tension in the room. Lucy reached back and touched Storm's head, drawing strength from the contact. It's not enough, Lucy whispered, tears now streaming down her face. Without another word, she turned and ran to her room, the dogs padding after her. The sound of her door slamming echoed through the apartment. Maribel collapsed forward, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm failing them, she whispered. I'm failing everyone. Mateo stood frozen in the doorway, torn between comforting his mother and checking on his sister. The weight of his own guilt, the Craigslist ad still sitting in draft form on his laptop, pressed down on him. In her room, Lucy sat on her bed, her back against the wall. Thunder and Storm lay on either side of her, their warm bodies pressing against her legs. She ran her fingers through their fur, finding comfort in their steady presence. I won't let them take you away, she whispered to them, her voice thick with tears. I promise. Mateo walked past her door, pausing to look through the crack. He saw his little sister surrounded by the two enormous dogs, speaking to them softly in the dim light. The guilt in his stomach twisted sharply as he watched her small hand stroke Storm's head, saw the way the massive dog leaned into her touch with complete trust. The apartment fell quiet except for the occasional sob from the kitchen and the soft murmur of Lucy's voice as she continued to talk to her dogs, promising them everything would be okay, even though she had no idea how to make that true. The morning sun crept through Lucy's window, casting long shadows across her small bedroom. Her alarm clock buzzed faintly, barely audible over the deep, rhythmic snoring of Thunder and Storm, who lay protectively on either side of her bed. Lucy's eyes fluttered open, and she immediately reached out to touch the dog's soft fur, reassuring herself they were still there. Her pink dress from yesterday was wrinkled, and her oversized sneakers sat in the corner, covered in dirt from their rooftop adventures. The clock read 8:15 a.m. She was already late for school. Her stomach twisted with anxiety, but not because of missing class. The thought of leaving the dogs alone made her heart ache. I can't go, she whispered to Thunder, running her small hand through his thick white and tan coat. What if they take you away while I'm gone? Storm lifted his massive gray head, dark eyes filled with understanding. He nudged her hand gently, making Lucy smile despite her worries. The dogs had become more than just pets to her. They were her closest friends, her protectors, her family. In the kitchen, she could hear Mateo getting ready for school. His footsteps paused outside her door. Lucy, you're going to be late. I'm sick, she called back, her voice scratchy from holding back tears. I can't go today. There was a long pause. Lucy held her breath, waiting. Finally, Mateo sighed. Just be careful, okay? His footsteps retreated, and moments later, the front door clicked shut. Once she was sure Mateo was gone, Lucy grabbed some crackers from the kitchen and led the dogs up to the roof using the fire escape. The morning air was crisp, and the city stretched out before them, a maze of buildings and streets that seemed far away from their quiet sanctuary. Lucy sat cross-legged on the concrete, breaking crackers into pieces and feeding them to the dogs. "You know," she said softly, "before you came, I used to hate being alone all the time." Thunder rested his massive head in her lap while Storm kept watch, his ears perking up at every distant sound. "Mom's always working, and Mateo, well, he tries, but he doesn't really understand." She stroked Thunder's ears, finding comfort in his warmth. "But you guys listen. You don't tell me I'm being silly or that I need to grow up." The morning stretched into afternoon. Lucy lay between the dogs, watching clouds drift across the sky. She felt safe here, protected by these gentle giants that everyone else feared. Storm's fur was soft against her cheek, and Thunder's steady breathing matched her own. From his bedroom window, Mateo watched them. His phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had responded to his Craigslist ad about the dogs. The guilt gnawed at his stomach as he saw how peaceful his sister looked up there, sandwiched between the two massive animals that had somehow become her closest companions. He remembered the way Lucy used to be, quiet, withdrawn, spending hours alone in her room. Now she talked constantly, telling the dog stories about school, about her dreams, about everything that crossed her mind. Her eyes sparkled when she was with them, like she'd finally found something that made her feel whole. Lucy didn't notice her brother watching. She was too busy sharing secrets with Thunder and Storm, telling them about the cartoon she'd watched last week, about the math test she was supposed to take today, about her favorite flavor of ice cream. The dogs listened attentively, their eyes never leaving her face. "I wish you could stay forever," she whispered, her voice catching. "I wish we could just stay up here and never have to worry about anything else." The afternoon sun warmed the rooftop, and Lucy's eyes grew heavy. Thunder shifted closer, creating a perfect pillow with his broad side. Storm lay at her feet, his protective presence a constant comfort. Her pink dress was dirty from the rooftop, but she didn't care anymore about keeping things neat and proper. As she drifted off to sleep, Lucy felt a peace she'd never known before. The world below might be full of worried mothers and threatening landlords and brothers who didn't understand. But up here, with Thunder and Storm, everything made sense. The dogs' steady breathing and warm bodies surrounded her like a cocoon. And for the first time in her young life, Lucy felt truly safe. She curled up tighter between them, her small frame almost disappearing in their massive presence. Thunder's tail thumped gently against the roof, and Storm's quiet huffs of breath created a perfect lullaby. Lucy's last conscious thought was a prayer that this moment would never end, that she could stay forever in this peaceful space where she finally belonged. The sounds of the city below faded away as Lucy fell into a deep sleep, protected by her unlikely guardians. Her pink dress was smudged with dirt, her hair tangled from the wind, but her face was peaceful, serene, in a way it had never been before. The two massive dogs remained alert even as she slept, their powerful bodies forming a protective circle around the small girl who had given them a home and her heart. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings as Mateo walked down the quiet alley. His footsteps echoed off the brick walls, each step making his stomach twist tighter. The grocery money felt heavy in his pocket, money that was supposed to be for milk and bread, not for what he was about to do. A white van with rusty edges and a dented side panel sat waiting in the shadows. Mateo's throat went dry at the sight. The dogs padded silently beside him, their massive forms drawing concerned glances from the few people who passed by on the main street. "You must be Matt," a voice called out. A man stepped away from the van, his face partially hidden under a baseball cap. He wore a stained jacket and work boots covered in mud. Something about his crooked smile made Mateo's skin crawl. "Yeah, that's me," Mateo replied, his voice cracking slightly. He gripped the makeshift leashes tighter, feeling the rough texture of Lucy's old belt and the frayed shoelace against his palm. The man walked closer, his eyes fixed on the dogs. "These are something else," he whispered, circling them slowly. "Never seen anything like them around here. Where'd you get them?" Mateo shifted uncomfortably. "Found them," he mumbled, trying to sound casual. "Can't keep them anymore. That's all." "Found them, huh?" The man's voice had an edge to it now. He stepped closer, making Mateo take a step back. "These are Caucasian shepherds, pure breeds, worth a lot of money to the right people." His eyes narrowed. "You sure you just found them?" The dogs stood perfectly still, but Mateo noticed their ears perking up, their muscles tensing. The white one with tan patches, the one Lucy called Thunder, fixed its gaze on the man, watching his every move. "Look, do you want them or not?" Mateo asked, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. The sooner this was over, the better. The man pulled out his phone, snapping pictures. "They're awful calm for strays," he said, not looking up. "Usually these breeds are aggressive. Someone must have trained them. Real professional job, I'd say." He looked directly at Mateo now. "You wouldn't happen to know who owned them before, would you?" Mateo's heart pounded against his ribs. "No idea," he said quickly, too quickly. "Because," the man continued, stepping even closer, "there's been some talk about missing dogs, valuable ones, from a private security facility up north." He pulled out a crumpled paper from his jacket. "Look familiar?" Before Mateo could respond, Thunder's demeanor changed instantly. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, and Storm, the darker one, followed suit. The man took another step forward, reaching toward Mateo with the paper. It happened in a flash. Thunder lunged forward with shocking speed, his powerful body crashing through the flimsy screen door of the nearby apartment building. The makeshift leash snapped like thread. Storm followed immediately after, both dogs now charging straight at the man, their teeth bared and barking, filling the narrow alley with thunderous echoes. The man stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. His hat flew off as he scrambled toward his van, face pale with terror. "Keep them back!" he screamed, fumbling with his keys. "Keep them back!" Mateo stood frozen, watching as the man practically dove into his van. The engine roared to life, tires squealing against the pavement as he reversed out of the alley at dangerous speed, nearly hitting a dumpster in his panic. The dogs stopped at the alley's entrance, their barking turning to low growls as the van disappeared around the corner. Then, as if nothing had happened, they turned and walked calmly back to Mateo, sitting at his feet. Mateo's legs felt weak. He leaned against the brick wall, his heart still racing. The dogs looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, and for the first time, he understood what Lucy had been trying to tell them all along. These weren't just some strays. They were something else entirely. Looking down at them, Mateo felt the weight of what he'd almost done crash over him. He'd nearly sold these dogs to someone who clearly knew more about their past than he did, someone who might have had dangerous intentions. The dogs sat quietly behind him now, as if they understood exactly what had just happened and were waiting for his next move. Mateo stared at them, his mind racing with questions about where they really came from and what kind of trouble he might have invited into their lives. "What have I gotten us into?" he whispered, more to himself than to the dogs. The empty alley offered no answers, just the echo of his own worried voice bouncing off the cold brick walls. The harsh knock echoed through the apartment like a thunderclap. Lucy's heart jumped as she sat at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas, picking at her cereal. Maribel froze mid-step, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. Mateo's face went pale. Another knock, more insistent this time. The dogs, hidden in Lucy's room, let out low rumbles. "Police! Open up!" a stern voice called through the door. Maribel set down her cup with trembling hands and smoothed her uniform. She walked to the door, her shoes clicking against the linoleum. When she opened it, Mr. Kozlov's stocky frame filled the doorway, his face red with anger. Two police officers stood behind him, their expressions hard and professional. "Mrs. Ramirez," Kozlov said, his accent thick with irritation, "we need to discuss the situation with these illegal animals." Lucy slid off her chair and pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself invisible. Mateo stepped forward, positioning himself between the door and the hallway, leading to Lucy's room. "Please, come in," Maribel said quietly, her voice barely steady. "The children are getting ready for school." "This cannot wait," Kozlov pushed past her into the apartment. "We received reports about dangerous dogs attacking someone yesterday. The security cameras show these animals outside the building." He pulled out his phone, showing grainy footage of the alley incident. One of the officers spoke up, his voice firm but neutral. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about potentially dangerous animals being kept in this residence. We need to address this immediately." Maribel's hands twisted together. "Please, officers, there has been a misunderstanding. The dogs, they are not dangerous." "Not dangerous?" Kozlov cut her off. "These are restricted breeds. They attacked someone yesterday. You know the building policy. No pets, especially not dangerous ones." Lucy crept closer to her mother, her small fingers clutching at Maribel's uniform. Tears welled in her eyes as she listened to them talk about her dogs, like they were monsters. "Mr. Kozlov," Maribel tried again, her voice stronger now, "we can find a solution. Give us time to—" "No more time." Kozlov's face grew redder. "I've been more than patient. You have 24 hours to remove these animals, or animal control will do it for you." He jabbed a finger toward Maribel. "And if they're not gone, you'll be facing eviction." The second officer stepped forward, his notepad out. "Ma'am, we need to document this. What breed are these dogs?" Before anyone could answer, a deep bark echoed from Lucy's room. Both officers tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their belts. Mateo spoke up quickly. "They're just scared. They won't hurt anyone." 24 hours, Kozlov repeated, his voice like ice. "Not 1 minute more. Either the dogs go or you all go." He turned to the officers. "You are my witnesses. I have given them fair warning." The officers nodded. The first one handed Maribel a card. "Animal control will be here tomorrow morning if the animals aren't removed. For everyone's safety, please comply with the building regulations." Lucy couldn't hold back anymore. "They're good dogs," she cried out. "They protect us. They love us." "Lucy, quiet," Maribel whispered, pulling her daughter close. Kozlov looked down at Lucy, his expression unmoved by her tears. "Rules are rules, little girl. This is not a place for dangerous animals." The officers made their final notes and followed Kozlov to the door. Before leaving, the second officer turned back. "Ma'am, please understand, this is for everyone's safety. These breeds can be unpredictable. It's better to handle this now before someone gets hurt." The door closed behind them with a final click. The apartment fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Lucy's quiet sobs and the soft whining of the dogs from her room. Maribel stood still for a long moment, then walked woodenly to her bedroom. They could hear her pulling boxes from the closet, the cardboard scraping against the floor. Mateo remained frozen in place, his eyes fixed on the floor. The guilt was written all over his face. If he hadn't tried to sell the dogs, if the buyer hadn't called animal control, maybe they'd have had more time. Lucy walked slowly to her room, pushing open the door. The dogs lay on her bed, their massive heads raised, alert but calm. She grabbed their makeshift leashes, holding them tight in her small fists. These weren't just dogs anymore. They were her family, her protectors, her friends. Her mother appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with worry. "Lucy," she said softly, then stopped, closing the door without another word. Lucy looked at her dogs one last time before the door shut and whispered, "We'll find a way." The apartment felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Mateo paced the small living room, his hands clenched into fists, while Maribel sat slumped at the kitchen table. Lucy huddled on the couch, the two dogs pressed against her legs. The evening light cast long shadows through the dusty windows, making everything feel darker, more intense. Mateo suddenly stopped pacing, his face twisted with anger as he spun toward his sister. "This is your fault," he shouted, making Lucy flinch. "We're losing everything because of these stupid dogs." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lucy's lower lip trembled as she wrapped her arms around one of the dog's thick necks. The animal stayed perfectly still, as if sensing the tension in the room. "I was trying to help them," Lucy whispered, but Mateo wasn't finished. "Help them? Look what's happening now. We're going to be homeless." His voice cracked. "All because you couldn't leave well enough alone." Maribel pushed back her chair with a screech. "Don't you dare put this all on her," she snapped at Mateo. "Where were you when she brought them home? You're supposed to be the older brother. You should have stopped this." Mateo's face reddened. "Me? I'm not their parent. Maybe if you were home more often." "Don't you dare!" Maribel's voice rose sharply. "I work 3 jobs to keep this roof over your head, to put food on the table." "Yeah, and now we're losing the roof anyway," Mateo shouted back. "Some parent you are." The dog shifted uneasily, pressing closer to Lucy. She could feel their warmth, their steady presence, while her family tore itself apart around her. "I trusted you to watch her." Maribel jabbed a finger at Mateo. "Instead, you let her bring home dangerous animals, and then you tried to sell them behind our backs." "At least I tried to fix it," Mateo's voice broke. "What have you done except work and sleep?" Lucy watched her mother's face crumple, saw the tears gathering in her eyes. The sight made something snap inside her chest. "Stop it!" she screamed, jumping to her feet. "Stop fighting! Nobody listens. Nobody ever listens." Both Mateo and Maribel turned to stare at her, startled by her outburst. "Lucy," Maribel started, but Lucy cut her off. "No, you don't care. None of you care." Tears streamed down her face. "They're the only ones who care about me. They listen when I talk. They don't yell or ignore me or... She hiccuped through her sobs. "They're the only family I have." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The dogs pressed against her legs, steady and warm, while her mother and brother stared at her with shocked expressions. "Mia?" Maribel whispered, reaching out. But Lucy couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't stand there and watch everything fall apart. With trembling hands, she grabbed the makeshift leashes, her old belt and shoelace, from the coffee table. "Lucy, don't!" Mateo started forward. But she was already moving. She clipped the leashes to the dogs' collars and ran for the door. Her bare feet slapped against the floor, her pink dress swishing around her knees. She yanked the door open and bolted into the hallway. "Lucy!" Her mother's voice echoed behind her. The door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the building. Lucy ran down the stairs, the dogs keeping pace beside her. Her feet hit the cold concrete of the sidewalk, but she didn't slow down. The evening air bit at her skin, but she kept running. Past the convenience store with its flickering neon signs, past the chain-link fences and potholes, past all the familiar landmarks of her neighborhood until she reached the alley where she'd first found them. Her lungs burned, and her feet stung from the rough pavement. Finally, she dropped to her knees in the alley, her chest heaving. The dogs settled beside her, their massive bodies forming a protective wall. In the growing darkness, Lucy wrapped her arms around their necks and buried her face in their fur. "I won't let them take you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I won't." The cold night air bit at Lucy's bare feet as she ran through the darkened streets of Cicero. Her pink dress fluttered around her knees, offering little protection against the biting wind. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision, but she kept running. The dogs matched her pace perfectly, their massive forms like silent guardians at her sides. Street lamps cast pools of yellow light on the cracked sidewalk. Lucy's chest burned with each breath, but she wouldn't stop. She couldn't. Behind her, she could still hear the echoes of her family's angry voices, the accusations flying back and forth like arrows. Each word had pierced her heart, driving her further into the night. "Almost there," she whispered to the dogs between gasping breaths. Their makeshift leashes, her old belt and shoelace, jingled softly as they ran. The familiar sight of the rundown strip mall came into view, its windows dark and empty. The graffiti-covered walls seemed to welcome her back, like old friends keeping watch in the darkness. Lucy's pace slowed as she turned into the alley. The dumpster loomed ahead, exactly where it had been when she first found them. The broken crate still lay behind it, a reminder of where this all began. Her legs trembled as she finally stopped running, her bare feet aching on the cold concrete. Dropping to her knees beside the crate, Lucy let out a shuddering breath. The tears came faster now, hot against her cold cheeks. The dogs pressed close, their warm bodies flanking her on either side. One of them gently nudged her face with its nose, while the other lay its massive head on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wrapping her arms around the nearest dog's neck. Its fur was soft against her wet cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I thought I could protect you. I thought—" Her voice broke on a sob. The alley was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the occasional rattle of the wind through discarded paper bags. Lucy pressed herself closer to the dogs, drawing comfort from their steady presence. They didn't judge her. They didn't yell or blame her for everything going wrong. They just stayed, silent and loyal, as if they understood exactly what she needed. "You're the only ones who really listen," she told them softly, running her fingers through their thick fur. "Everyone else is too busy fighting or working or—" She swallowed hard, remembering Mateo's angry face, her mother's tired eyes. "Or just giving up." The larger dog, the white one with tan patches, licked her hand. Its tongue was warm and rough against her cold skin. Lucy managed a watery smile. "At least you understand." A streetlight flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows across the alley. Lucy shivered, suddenly aware of how cold it was. The dogs moved closer, their body heat helping to ward off the chill. She leaned back against the rough brick wall, feeling the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones. "If you stay, they'll kill you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words hurt to say, but she knew they were true. Animal control would come, and these beautiful, gentle creatures would be labeled as dangerous. "If you leave," her voice caught, "if you leave, I'll be alone again." The dogs remained still, their eyes reflecting the dim light as they watched her. They seemed to understand the weight of her words, the impossible choice she faced. Lucy reached out to touch their faces, one hand on each dog. Their fur was soft under her fingers, familiar now after these precious few days together. The night grew quieter around them. The traffic sounds faded to distant whispers, and even the wind seemed to die down. Lucy's eyes grew heavy as the emotional toll of the day caught up with her. She curled up between the dogs, their massive bodies forming a protective circle around her small frame. The concrete was hard beneath her, but she hardly noticed. The dogs' warmth surrounded her, and their steady breathing created a soothing rhythm. Her pink dress was dirty now, spotted with tears and grime from the alley. But she didn't care. Here, in this moment, she felt safer than she had in her own home. As sleep began to overtake her, Lucy felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The dogs shifted slightly, adjusting their positions to better shield her from the cold. Their presence was solid and reassuring, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. In the quiet of the alley, surrounded by their protective embrace, Lucy finally drifted off to sleep. The night settled around them like a blanket. The dogs remained alert, their ears occasionally twitching at distant sounds. But they never moved from their position around Lucy. They had found their person, just as she had found them. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Lucy's eyes fluttered open to the harsh morning light. Her body ached from sleeping on the cold, hard ground of the alley, and her pink dress was now smudged with dirt and grime. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind as she tried to remember where she was. Then she felt the warm, solid presence of the two dogs pressed against her sides, and everything came rushing back. The larger dog, the one with white and tan patches, gently nudged her cheek with its wet nose. The dark gray one lifted its massive head, alert but calm, watching over her like a silent guardian. Despite the chill in the air and the discomfort of her makeshift bed, Lucy felt safe between them. "Good morning, babies," she whispered, her voice scratchy from sleep. She reached out to pat their heads, drawing comfort from their familiar presence. The events of the previous night played through her mind like a bad dream. The shouting, the accusations, the tears, and her desperate run into the darkness. Lucy's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. She slowly sat up, her muscles protesting the movement. The alley looked different in the morning light, less threatening, but somehow more depressing. Empty food containers and discarded newspapers littered the ground around the dumpster where she'd first found her faithful companions. "We should go home," she said softly to the dogs, though the word home felt strange on her tongue. Was it still home after everything that had happened? The dogs stood up as she did, shaking out their thick fur and waiting patiently as she straightened her wrinkled dress. The walk back to the apartment was quiet. The morning air was crisp, and few people were out on the streets. Those who were hurried past, casting wary glances at the massive dogs flanking the small girl in the dirty pink dress. Lucy barely noticed them. Her mind was too full of worry about what she would find when she got home. The familiar sight of her apartment building came into view. The peeling paint, the rusty mailboxes, the cracked concrete steps. Lucy's heart beat faster as she climbed the stairs, the dog's nails clicking against the steps behind her. The hallway seemed longer than usual, and each step toward her apartment door felt heavy with dread. When she reached for the doorknob, her hand trembled slightly. The door was unlocked, just as she'd left it in her hurried escape the night before. She pushed it open slowly, and the silence that greeted her was deafening. "Mom," she called out softly. "Mateo." No answer came back to her. The apartment felt empty, hollow somehow. The dogs padded in behind her, their presence reassuring as she moved through the quiet rooms. The living room looked different. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, some already sealed with packing tape, others still open and waiting to be filled. Lucy recognized her mother's neat handwriting on the sides. Kitchen, clothes, Lucy's room. She walked to her bedroom, the dogs following close behind. More boxes waited there, and her closet door stood open, half empty. Her favorite stuffed animals were already packed away, the shelf where they usually sat, looking bare and lonely. Back in the living room, Lucy sank onto the familiar couch. The dogs settled on either side of her, as they had done so many times before. But now, instead of feeling like a secret rebellion, their presence felt like her only anchor in a world that was rapidly shifting beneath her feet. The silence pressed in around her. No sounds of her mother getting ready for work, no music from Mateo's room, no familiar creaks and groans of their neighbors going about their morning routines. Just silence and the steady breathing of her faithful companions. Lucy looked down at the dogs, their intelligent eyes fixed on her face. They seemed to understand her sadness. They were pressing closer against her sides. The white and tan one rested its huge head on her lap, while the dark gray one kept watch, alert but calm. "We'll figure this out," she whispered, wrapping her arms around the nearest dog's neck. "I promise." The words echoed in the empty apartment, a small voice against the vast silence. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the boxes that represented her family's imminent departure. Lucy sat there, surrounded by the evidence of change, with only her beloved dogs to keep her company in the quiet uncertainty of the morning. In the days after the dogs were taken, Lucy wandered her apartment in grief. Mateo retreated into silence, Maribel worked longer hours, and the home felt colder, emptier. The dogs had filled a void none of them had known existed, and their absence was a quiet ache that touched everything. Then, a letter arrived from Wisconsin. Mr. Wilkes, a breeder, wrote to Lucy explaining 2 Ovcharka dogs had been anonymously surrendered, dogs who refused to eat until hearing a girl's voice. Upon playing a recording of Lucy's, they perked up. They remembered her. The letter reignited hope. Maribel, moved by Lucy's heartbreak and determination, agreed to drive north to the farm. Mateo, too, showed renewed care, helping plan the trip and even offering to help cover costs. The drive was filled with Lucy's memories of the dogs, her protectors, her friends. When they arrived at the farm, Mr. Wilkes led them to a large pen. The moment the dogs saw Lucy, they bounded to the fence and greeted her with gentle affection. Their bond, unchanged by time or distance, brought tears to everyone's eyes. Inside the farm office, Mr. Wilkes played a voicemail that had helped the dogs begin eating again. It was Lucy's voice, recorded unintentionally. Hearing it now deepened the sense of connection. Lucy fed them treats, whispering promises that she'd always return. But the visit brought hard truths. Mr. Wilkes gently explained the dogs thrived in open space, something their small apartment couldn't offer. Tearfully, Lucy agreed to leave them in the care of the farm, but asked to visit. Mr. Wilkes promised she could. Back home, life slowly shifted. They moved into a new, brighter apartment. The air felt lighter, the family more connected. One morning on Lucy's birthday, Mateo surprised her with a framed photo of her and the dogs in the snow. A quiet moment of reunion, joy, and love. They hung it on the kitchen wall, a daily reminder of everything the dogs had given them. "We thought we were saving them," Lucy whispered, "but they saved us." If you enjoyed the story of Lucy, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. If you enjoyed the story of Lucy, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.